Hey everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have a dual review of Mancunian Ways and The Sound of Revolution. Both of these books were sent to me by Isabelle Kenyon, who is the editor of this book, and this is released by Fly on the Wall Press. In my wrap-up last week, I incorrectly stated that Grae J. Wall was one of Fly on the Wall Press's authors. They are not. Isabelle is just helping them with promotion of their works, the collection, and an upcoming book. So firstly, I'll just say I was sent both of these books for free in exchange of an honest review, and so that is what you're going to get here. Firstly, we have Mancunian Ways. I was thrilled to be offered this book, not least because it features some of my favourite poets, Olivia Walwyn, Rosie Garland and Cheryl Pearson, but also because it is a celebration of Manchester and discusses Manchester and the people of that area and the way they interact with one another. I don't think there are a lot of books that focus on the North or celebrate the North, so I'm always incredibly glad to see them. We have to admit we have a very London-centric gaze when it comes to fiction in this country, and so apart from poetry, we're very rarely seeing stuff talking about this area. But as I say, some of my favourite poets are in here, and so I wanted to explore more of their work, and I discovered a great many new favourite poets from this collection. This collection also comes with some stunning photography from Manchester, and I would show it, but I don't know whether that breaks copyright law or whether that's part of the review, but know that some of the images just captured some of the starkness that you see in Manchester, and captured the people and the diversity within Manchester as well. And then you get some images that remind me a bit of mixed media. I'm not sure what it's called. Some of them which are by, let's see now, Penny Sharman were definitely up there as some of my favourite images, and I think that these pictures could do very well as like just framed on your wall. This book is separated into sections, so we have Northern Dream, Modern Manchester, Northern Spirit, which featured some of my favourite poems, Mancunian History, Northern Grit, Northern Culture and Last Orders. What I liked about the poets here was the fact that they were celebrating Manchester. Yes, it explored some of the darker parts of what happens in any big city, and I appreciated them bringing that to the forefront of poetry and challenging poets, but also the way in which these poems were written. I am not the biggest fan of rhyme. I'll say it now. I admit it freely. If a rhyme is there and it seems forced, I feel like there needs to be a rhythm there, and sometimes the rhythm can be lost. But here, there was rhyme, and it was used in a way that impressed me. I still think that Cheryl Pearson and Olivia Walwyn, the two writers that I have met before, I think you get a different impression of a collection when they're featured there. I say this, it means that I would have read the collection anyway, knowing that they were featured in the collection. I think that Isabelle has done a very good job of editing this and collating it into such a way, because poems that are about certain topics are placed next to each other. And so even though these writers might have been writing completely separate poems with completely separate ideas, the way that Isabelle's put them together, it feels like they kind of flow into one another. And I really like that. It feels like the editor had a keen eye as to what worked with each other, what worked against each other, what gave different and opposing views. I like this huge image that's built up of Manchester, both past and present, throughout the reading of it, and what people who live there and have lived there are thinking about the city nowadays, or thought about the city when they lived there, and how it has changed, or the sensation of home it brings to them. I like the fact that you have this emphasis on the language they were speaking. I know that sometimes outside of England, people don't really hear the slang that we have in the north, so it takes a lot for them to understand it. I remember working with someone once and I kept having to figure out what to say and how it would be said in proper English, because they'd only ever been taught how people are taught to speak in the South, or had been taught American English, which was even more of a nightmare to try and get my head around to translate to them. Ultimately, this is a great celebration of the North with some fantastic poems in here. I will be revisiting this collection because of what it does, and I think if you happen to like Manchester and you are interested in what's going on there politically as well as socially, then this is a great collection to be going on with. Next we have The Sound of the Revolution by Grae J. Wall, which on the front says beat poems and anxious gasps. I did not appreciate the reading experience here as much as I would have appreciated hearing these poems live. I think that the poems were very much written to be performed as opposed to being read, and it's also not my style of poetry, the style of poetry that I most care for. However, I think for what the poet is going for, they have done a very good job, and what it says on the front is it does exactly what it says on the tin. Here we have the poet's thoughts on topics going on in society, again, not just today, but over the last, well, 60 years. I could see these poems being performed at an open mic or a poetry slam and them going down really well. There are some great images here that need to be heard to be properly appreciated, and I do think that could you hear the way the poet meant them to be read, then you would get a lot more out of them. Know that I didn't care for the poems, but I also know that that comes down to personal taste. I don't mind going to an open mic or, like I say, a poetry slam and having the poems read, and performed, and there's this sense of camaraderie at one of those, that when poems like this get read, you're like, yeah, they've hit the nail on the head. Most of the topics in here and the way they talked about, I feel like for me, would be one and done type things. Once you've heard them, you don't necessarily need to hear them again. The poet raises interesting points about stuff happening socially and politically, and you get an idea of their political leanings and their ideals from their work. I'm one who prefers a bit more subtlety, really. I think, like I say, it will go down well performed, and that's all I could think whilst I was reading it, was I can imagine the type of person reading this. I can imagine how well it will go down at an open mic. I can definitely imagine the applause that they would get for expressing these thoughts in public. Sometimes, unfortunately, that does lead to this type of thing where, for me, it felt a bit like what you'd get on Facebook when someone shares a photograph and they've written something the tiniest bit profound on there, and for me that didn't lend itself well to poetry. I prefer poetry that's got a bit more imagery in there, a bit more description, and whilst there are images in here, and those were my favourite poems, sometimes you are just getting poems that are political statements, or you're getting poems that just tell you the author's thoughts without perhaps showing examples, which I don't think you can do in beat poems, really. You need that shortness and that brevity, that concision, and that's why, like I say, I think if you appreciate beat poems of the past, then you're going to like this. I think that if you're politically minded, then you will like this book as well, but it just, unfortunately, wasn't the collection for me, but I know that it will definitely have its fans. I feel that with some of the poems they could have done with some more editing, some more paring down, and I feel as though sometimes the essence of the poem was found, but it took some finding, because the poet would sometimes include a lot of unnecessary fluff that kind of dampened down the impact they were looking for. However, like I say, if you are a fan of beat poems, then it might be something to seek out, and it really would be beneficial to an indie author to seek out their work, and I will always uphold indie authors even if I did not much care for the work myself. They are my reviews. Once again, I would like to say thank you to Isabelle Kenyon of Fly on the Wall Press for sending me both of these books. I am really appreciative of that. It's always nice when someone thinks that my thoughts might add something to the conversation. If you have read either of these books or you plan to, then please do let me know in the comments. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.